Blog Talk Radio. Hi, and welcome to The Art of Film Funding. I'm your co-host, Claire Papin, along with Carol Dean, author of the best-selling book, The Art of Film Funding. Carol is also the founder and president of From the Heart Productions and the host of this show. Morrie Warshawski is a consultant, facilitator, and writer who has spent 30 years specializing in the nonprofit sector. His work is characterized by a commitment to the core values of creativity, thoughtfulness, tolerance, and transparency. Warshawski works with nonprofits that are having difficulty achieving their goals. He helps them reach their dreams through strategic planning. Morrie is well known for his funding book, Shaking the Money Tree, 3rd edition, and for his brilliant book, The Fundraising House Party. And Carol, Morrie is a donor to your grants, right?
Yes, he is, Claire. Morrie is dedicated to supporting documentary filmmakers, and he gives a generous donation to the winner of our film grant. So thanks for joining us, Morrie.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Well, we're going to have a lot of fun today. We want to cover funding parties, your brilliant book, Shaking the Money Tree, and learn more about how you work with filmmakers. And I want to start with the Fundraising House Party book because I believe that it's an excellent resource for artists to fund themselves. And
Thank
I
you.
noticed, it is. It is so exciting, such a precious little book, but it's packed with information. Now, I noticed in the preface of the 2nd edition that you said you had no idea how popular house parties would become. Are they still growing in popularity?
Yeah, because everybody knows about them now. They used to be only done by political parties. They were very popular in the political realm. And then everybody else started picking up on the fact that they could do them as well, that they were usable and an effective tool for fundraising in almost any kind of venue. So, yeah, they're still going strong, stronger than ever.
And do filmmakers consult with you sometimes about creating a party like this?
Occasionally I will have a call that's just party-oriented, and usually I'll just say, read the book first and then call me up if you still have questions, because the book is very, very granular and A to Z about exactly how to do it and what the shortcomings are and how not to make mistakes. But typically I will fold advice about house parties into a larger discussion about fundraising, because it shouldn't be the only way you look for money. But it could and should be a part of a fundraising plan.
Oh, that's exactly right. I remember in one of the classes I took that you gave, you talked about drawing a circle, big round circle, and then dividing it up, and that circle represented your time. And you should look at what time you want to use for each of the funding opportunities, like grants, fundraising parties. I guess crowdfunding would be part of that now. You want to share that with us?
Yeah, well, I counsel my clients to be strategic about where they put their time, energy, and money, because all of those items are very limited. So that means when I take a look at the environment for funding, I see the filmmakers swimming through a potential sea of money sources. There are lots of ways to raise money, and the filmmaker's job is to step back and look at that landscape and figure out which areas they want to swim through and what kind of swim stroke they're going to need to learn to be viable and successful in those arenas. So, I mean, briefly, I can outline the places where many are. And the first, of course, is individuals. So if you take a look at where money comes from for all nonprofit, non-commercial ventures available, over 80% comes from individuals.
Wow.
And based on figures from like the last 50 years. So that's one venue for getting money, and it turns out there are lots of different ways to get money from individuals, and house parties is one way, crowdfunding is another way, one-on-one individual asks is one way. And then another pot of money is grants, and grants typically are coming either from private foundations or from government agencies, and those are two different worlds that are very dense as well, and you need to learn about them. And then there's corporate support, and support from small businesses. So you've got a really nice, broad swath, a rainbow of possibilities for money, but it's much too big and dense to attack all of it. And that means the filmmaker has to step back and ask a couple of big questions. One is, who am I? And which of these venues is more viable for me as a person? So personality does have a big difference in fundraising. You know, if you're going to ask people for money one-on-one, you've got to be able to jump over that fear factor of dealing with people and looking them in the eye and asking for money. Or maybe you're a kind of filmmaker who's better at writing and articulating your work on paper. Maybe you're a filmmaker who does have business connections. So that's one area. And then the second area is your project, because your project is not going to be attractive to every funding avenue. It's going to be likely more attractive to certain areas of the fundraising environment. So some projects are just never going to get grants. Some projects are never going to get corporate support. Some projects just aren't good with major donors. So you have to ask those two questions, you put them together, and then you put together a viable strategy for where you're going to spend your time and energy and money and looking for money. And unfortunately, you're going to be spending a lot of your time looking for money. So it's really important to be strategically impactful about how you do that you're spending your time with intent, understanding how you're going to do it.
Wow. Yes, that does take a lot of thought and planning.
Yeah.
And this, going back to the fear factor and making the ask, that's a major problem for a lot of filmmakers because they're very creative people, but they either love to write and then storyboard and talk to the director, but they're just not people. And they tell me, I can't do this. So what do you say to someone like that? How do you help them?
Well, the first thing I say to them is, do you need to do it? Does it need to be done? Because if it doesn't, then you don't have to. But I don't have a problem with that. And then the filmmaker will sit back for a minute and say, well, yeah, it absolutely must be done because this project has to happen, and I have to see it through. And then I'll say, well, okay, if that's true, then how you feel about it doesn't matter, does it?
Right.
You have to get over that. So I'll say, let's take a look at the avenues that are most appropriate for this project. Where could it get the money? And then you've got to find a way to overcome your fears or disabilities or impediments. You have to find a way to get over those impediments and just get that money the way it must be gotten. So, there are workarounds for disabilities. And sometimes it means finding a partner who's really good with people or hiring someone, bringing in a team. So in different areas of fundraising, it's easier or harder to get that. So, for instance, if you're not a good writer, that's the easiest problem to overcome. So if you find that your project is really going to be appropriate for the granting environment, then there are many, many good writers out there and grant writing people that you could hire. And as long as you can articulate your project well and be passionate about it, they can turn that into good verbiage. What's harder to find is someone who would approach major donors with you or for you. That's very difficult to do. And actually, when we talk about house parties, that's the one thing I love about house parties is the filmmaker does not ask for money at the party. So you could be a very shy, introverted filmmaker and still have a house party and raise a lot of money, and you don't have to make the ask, but you do have to be articulate and passionate about your film.
And passionate about your film. That
Yeah.
is so very important,
Yeah.
because being pitched as much as I am because of the film grant that we get,
Yes.
I can tell you that that I love the passion. I think that passion is the key, and because people seem to override and do things that are impossible with their passion. It's amazing,
They have
don't
to.
you find?
They have to. And that's why, when I talk to filmmakers about pitch, passion is the first thing I mention. Because if you don't have that, the rest is moot. Forget about it. And you know what? When you are talking to people, they can feel that or not feel it immediately. They know from many signals whether or not your heart is in that project. And because, especially people like you and I, we know what it takes to make these things happen. And I can tell you, if the filmmaker is not passionate about it, it ain't going to happen. Because it's just too hard.
Exactly. And I remember you saying one time, I can tell in 30 seconds when someone starts to pitch me, in 30 seconds I can tell you if they're going to get their film funded or not.
Yeah, I'll have a good bead on it, yeah.
Yeah, that's right. And so I tell people, because I do teach pitching to our physically sponsored filmmakers, and I tell them that sometimes when people start to pitch me, I'm looking at them wondering, because the thoughts I want to know is, are they going to finish the film? Are they committed?
Right. Exactly.
And are they passionate? Will they shop at the thrift store for the next 5 years? Can they drive the same car for a long time?
That's right.
What are their commitments? And so sometimes you must not pitch too long, because there's a lot of stuff going on in the recipient's head. You need to make it a very short beginning, pause, and make sure they're still with you, because there's a moment when you can feel that person has crossed over a trust line, and they have decided they're going to trust you, and then they often say, now what was it you were saying? Tell me again, right?
Yes, that's right.
And it's so you can tell pretty much. So what do? You advise people on how to get better or hire someone to help them, but they have to really commit to the fact that they know they're going to need, and that's the second thing that's so important, is a valid budget to look at, right?
Yes. Yeah, and I'll tell you something funny. When I started doing this work with filmmakers, I am not an accountant or a good bookkeeper. I have trouble balancing my checkbook every month. Honestly, I just admit that publicly. But what I learned early in this game is that when filmmakers send me a full proposal and it includes the budget, I know this is a little odd, but I will look at the budget first.
Sure.
Because what I've learned is typically I can discover many of the things that are either wrong or right with the project and its approach from looking at the budget. It tells me whether or not the filmmaker has really understood what's cooking and what's viable and what's necessary for the project. For instance, have they included any money in for PR? Is there
you never
money
see
in
that.
there? You never see it, but how are you going to get the film out if you don't market it? Is there money for distribution and community engagement? And I'm looking for all of that just to get a sense of how smart and aware that filmmaker is. And then I'll go back and read the project. But typically, I've got a lot of good notes just from looking at that budget.
Yes, and one thing that I find is that they under budget music.
Yes.
Music rights.
Yeah.
You know, you'll like I saw a dance film in my film grant. Music rights, 15,000. You got to be kidding me! What's
Yeah, and
more
they're planning
like
to use Bruce Springsteen's music.
Yes, that's right. So first you have to have a budget that is realistic, and then they have to face the music and say, "My gosh, is it really $250,000?" And the answer is yes.
Well, I'll tell you the other thing that's always missing from a budget I see, 99% of the time, is the expected and potential income sources. So typically, I only see the expense side. I'm also really interested in where they think the money's going to come from. And definitely, if you go to a granting agency with a budget, they're going to ask you, the filmmaker, well, where have you already raised your funds from, and where do you think the rest will come from? Because I'm not going to give you 100%. And how savvy or smart are you about the potential sources? Do they look like really viable sources?
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. That's why that's when people get in the finals of our film grant, that's the first thing I do is go back and say, if they haven't included it, what grants have you applied for? Because that gives me a good idea if they are actively out there, and if the grants would match their film, because that seems to be the number one reason, isn't it, that people are turned down for grants because they don't fit the criteria?
Oh, that is a major reason. What I find is that filmmakers have gotten smarter and smarter over the years about that arena. And I don't meet too many filmmakers anymore who are going for grants that are inappropriate for their project. What I find the major reason for getting turned down for a grant now is a simple reason, and that's competition. So and that's why grants are harder and harder to get now, and it can't be your only potential source of funding, with the exception of very few filmmakers, like maybe Ken Burns. But for most filmmakers, the odds of you getting a grant are maybe 20 to 1 or 30 to 1 or even higher.
Gosh.
Yeah. So I consider 20 to 1 good odds now. So that should tell you something. And the competition is really stiff because there are a lot of people out there who've been around for a while. They're competing with you for the same money. It's really, really a tough environment.
Absolutely, it is. And you don't want to discourage filmmakers, but it is the competition. And every grant, I can say that as a grantor, every grant is different. And I see that, if sometimes I'll sit there and think, you know what? If the woman who was second in the summer grant had applied again for the fall grant, she would have probably won because the competition isn't here. And when you say to a filmmaker, I'm sorry you didn't win the grant, they say, why? And I said, well, it's the competition. And now I just get more specific, Maury, and I tell them it's human trafficking. It's people living on the streets in L.A. I mean, some of these subjects that we get are so urgent that they automatically go above an art film, which I love, or something, or a biography about someone who was very special. And it's a shame, but that's what happens.
Yeah, and that's why you need to have a strategy for fundraising that is multidimensional, that doesn't look for just one kind of source for support. And luckily there are many more avenues open now for fundraising than ever before. That's an upside and a downside, but you're absolutely right.
One of the best films that ever applied for the grant was a film about Kusama by two women who were adamant. Do you remember Heather and Karen?
Oh, yes, I remember them. Yeah.
15 years it has taken them, and they are now opening And of course, it's as if the universe put them on hold because no one knew who Kusama was.
Yeah,
10
and now
years
everybody
ago.
does.
Everybody does.
Yeah.
So now their film, Submarine took their film, and the big event is happening in a month, where they're going to have their major screening. And they went to Sundance.
I'm so happy for them, and timing is everything.
It is, but Maury, I mean, they never gave up. And
well, that's the other thing. You have to, if you're going to be in this game, you have to learn how to be persistent. You have to learn how to be persistent because it just doesn't happen overnight. It takes years. I mean, the first film that my daughter did, she thought she could finish it in a year or two, and it took 6 years. And I warned her. I said, well, you may think you can get this done in a year or two, but call me 3 years from now. Let's see where you are. It took 6 years. And her second film took 6.5, 7 years. But by then she knew it would. Yeah. Her latest film, that's how long? 6.5.
Big Sonia?
Big Sonia took 6.5 years. And it started out again, she thought it would be a little 20-minute film and they could knock it out in like one trip to Kansas City. And then the first trip to Kansas City opened up their eyes to a larger story. And now you've got a 90-minute film that came out a year ago but took 6.5 years to do. It's now in its 7.5 year, and it's just finally entering the educational market. And, it's going to be another 2 years of work distributing in education. So we're talking about 9 to 10 years of her life.
Well, now, talk about tenacity and commitment. That's your daughter.
Yeah.
She's wonderful.
Yeah, she is. If she sets her mind to doing something, just get out of her way. It's going to happen.
That is great. Well, Claire and I are big fans of hers because we've been watching how Big Sonia is so well received around the country. And see, she's right. Sometimes you turn on the camera and people start talking and you see all these threads to the story that you never knew were there. And a good filmmaker will follow those, right?
Yeah. Yes. And that's why films take longer to make than you think.
Yes. But then you're really making the important thing. Well, this brings me to something that I find often people say to me, I'm not sure exactly what the story's going to be till I do more interviews. I think I know, but I'm not sure. And I say, well, you have to tell me what you think it will be, because if you don't tell me a story, that's what we fund, so you have to tell me that. And it's, so how do you get them in the beginning to come up with a story when they really, they don't know? I understand that they don't know, but usually I've never given a grant to anyone that didn't make a better film than they expected to make.
Right, yeah. Well, I use a mechanism to make that happen, and that's forcing them to write a treatment. And that forces the issue. So I don't let a filmmaker get away with in their packet for funding without having at least a 2-page treatment. And quite often, if it's especially a verite documentary filmmaker, they'll say, "Well, I don't know what's going to happen," and I'll say, "Well, that doesn't matter. Pretend." Let's start out with pretend that this is what you're hoping will happen or likely to happen. Give me some sense of that. And I understand you're doing a documentary and things are going to change, but you got to start someplace. So let's start with that. And that usually helps get them over that hump by giving them permission to pretend and know that they're not locked into that treatment as a script. It's not like a narrative film where you've got a script, you need to kind of follow it. It's what you're hoping will happen. It gives me a sense of the shape of what the story might look like and where you plan to go with it and how you plan to do it. And that's what I need to see at the beginning. Once you start shooting and you're into it, then things will change.
Right. And usually for the better. It's a great way.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, I want to go back to the funding party again for a minute. So, do you recommend that people have more than one party?
I typically do, but everything depends on whether or not it's appropriate for your film and where in its geography and who's supporting it. So most films can definitely have more than one party if they can find more than one host. And the key really is finding the host. But if you've got more than one host, I mean, you could be in a small town and have 3, 4, or 5 parties and be just fine. Or you could have parties all over the country if it's appropriate for your project and you've got people who love you and the project around the country. So, yeah, I would think about having more than one party.
And when you have these parties, tell us what you want the host to do for you. What do you ask them to do?
Oh, well, the host is key to the whole thing. If you don't have a good host, then you're not going to have a good party. Because, well, the first thing you need from the host is the love. Mm-hmm. They need to love you and love the project. The second thing you need from the host before anything else happens is they must make a commitment to the project. They have to make a donation. So typically your hosts will come from people who've already donated. But if you've got someone who approaches you or you approach them to be the host of the party, they need to know that that party's not going to work unless they can stand up at the party at night in front of their friends and say, I have already given to this project, or I'm going to be writing a check tonight to that project. So that's square one. They have to be really committed. And then square two is they need to volunteer the use of their home, the place where they live. Not their business, not renting at a hall or going to a gallery or wherever. They need to be willing to invite people into their house. The second thing is, and it's bottom line, they must be willing to open up their Rolodex, their address book, and invite their friends. That's crucial because, you know, what drives these things is being social and social pressure. So they need to be willing to personally invite their friends. After that, there are things they can do but don't have to do. Typically, they will provide for and take care of the food, almost 99% of the time. But if they don't, then that's something the filmmaker might have to provide. Typically, they will design, write, and send out the invitations. But again, if they don't have time or energy to do that, then the filmmaker might have to do that.
Right.
Right. And then the last thing is it would be great if they would volunteer to do the follow-up calls after the party. But again, they are not required to do that. It just helps if they will. So that's the range of things you would like from the host.
And that is a lot. So going back to what you said, they have to love you and love the project.
The square one. That is square one. You don't want someone who just says, well, you can come to my house, you invite people, and I won't even be there that night, but you can have my house. No, that doesn't work. Even if they have a mansion on the hill, that everybody wants to get into, no, they've got to be there to vouchsafe for you and the project.
Yes. And a lot of times people go just to see the inside of the house,
Yeah,
I've heard.
That's right.
No, I was invited. One of the women that was physically sponsored under me, she had a house funding party in Montecito. It wasn't too far of a drive, and I wanted to see the house. It was the guy who wrote The Chicken Soup of the Soul.
Yeah.
And it was a wonderful party, but they offered you, there were 3 ways that you could contribute. And I think people got confused. And so I don't think that she got the money that she had the potential to get. So I don't know. I think it's keep it simple, very simple.
Absolutely. Keep it really simple and easy to happen. Don't complicate it. Don't throw up any impediments. Just you make it easy for people, and you'll get the money.
Well, one woman who raised an enormous amount of money through $50 checks, $50, $100 checks, it just came in like popcorn for her.
Yeah.
And she had a funding party, and at the party, she gave everyone the little, like a postcard size thing where you check off, I want to donate, and here's my credit card, or here's my check, and with an envelope. And
Right.
those envelopes came in for 3 to 6 months later, than
Yes.
after the party.
Yes.
Why is that? That was shocking to me.
It's not. In fact, if you kind of look at the statistics for how and when money comes in for parties, typically I tell my clients 30% of the final amount is going to come in after the party.
Wow.
Yeah. So if you raise $10,000 that night, you're going to get another $3,000 or $4,000 afterwards. And there are lots of reasons for it. Sometimes it's just because people have to go home and talk about it. Like my wife and I have an agreement that if a donation is over a certain amount, we both have to agree to it. Under a certain amount, I can just write the check and nobody cares. But if it's going to be a big amount, then we have to talk. So they might have come to the party without their spouse. Sometimes they just some people need time to think about it. So the difference between thinkers and feelers, or if you know much about personality types. So some people just need to go home and reason it out. And then so that's part of it. And then sometimes people need a little nudging, a little pushing, and that's what calls after the party are really crucial. And it's most powerful if the host will call the people who didn't give that night to check in with them after the party, and that will bring money in.
Oh, what a great idea. The host calls and says, did you have a good time? Did you like the film? That kind of thing?
Yeah, and then they say, I noticed you weren't able to write a check that night.
Whoa.
Are you ready to give
really...
now? And if not, can I help you,
Wow.
And it has to be that direct.
This is great. Of course, why not?
Yeah, absolutely.
And then that really works, doesn't it?
Oh, yes. It does.
That is.
It's a lot about social pressure.
Wow. All right. Well, your book is just so full of information. It's when you look at it, it's what is it, 50 pages? But every
it's a slim volume, yeah.
It's 4 or 5 great ideas. I mean, you read it, you think, oh, that's great, and then, oops, I never knew that. Even with as many parties as I've attended and suggested people have, I still found new stuff in your book. So thank you for that.
Oh, you're welcome. Well, what I found was that the devil is really in the details. And to make a party really successful, you have to do everything right. If you miss one of the details, then you can miss out on the money. And I'd been doing a lot of fundraising, and before I noticed that nobody had ever really deconstructed the party and talked about how to really do it. They all just recommend that you do it, but that doesn't help the person who needs to have it done. They need to know the nitty-gritty.
Oh, yeah, these details are terrific. Now, in the book, it mentions a host committee,
yes.
And I don't know what that is. Can you tell me about that?
Well, double your pleasure, double your fun. See, the key to the party really working is to have enough of the right people in the room. And what helps, I found, is if the host will gather together a small committee of other like-minded people who will also do 2 things. One is they will invite their friends to the party as well. Mm-hmm. And they help arrange for the evening, taking care of the decorations and the food. They help send out the invitations. They might help with the follow-up calls. And they're there that night to mill around and talk to people. Oh, and by the way, if you want to be in the host committee, you have to make a donation too. Dude, one of the beautiful things about party is you raise a lot of money before the party even happens. That's one of the things I love about house party. So you're raising, the host is going to give you money.
Yes.
Everyone on the host committee is going to make a donation, so you've already got money there. And then the other thing is when you send out invitations, 60 to 70% of the people you invite are not going to come that night, and a percentage of those people who can't come are going to send you money anyway. They're going to write back because you send them a card that says, sorry, I can't come, but here's my donation. So you make money before you even open the doors at the party.
Oh, this is marvelous for filmmakers to know. But they wouldn't know this if you hadn't put it in the book. They wouldn't know how to do that. So I like that host committee because then you've got a better chance of getting 20 people or 25 people there, because it's really hard for one person to get that many people unless they're really well known. And
it takes a lot of pressure off of the host, and it makes it more fun. So one of the reasons to do these parties is they are a lot of fun. And in fact, one of the byproducts of these parties is almost always somebody who came to it said, I want to host one for you too. Can I do that?
Oh, yes, that is the key factor, isn't it, to keep it going?
Yeah.
Well, I went to a party, and the food was fantastic. And the filmmaker talked about her project, and it just didn't work. It wasn't working. I don't know why, but nevertheless, I had to sit down. So I went and sat next to an older gentleman, and he was watching the trailer. And I said, wow, look at that. She was in Paris. It was a film on neon, and there she was. I said, wow. He said, oh, really? I said, yes. And look, that's South Texas. I know that. And what a great job she did editing all this together. And I love the music, and I made comments, He ended up being the biggest donor of the night, because even though he was sitting there watching the film, he had no idea what it took to make the film.
Yes. So that night, did they entertain questions from the audience, and did somebody make a powerful ask?
They didn't entertain questions from the audience.
That's a mistake.
And somebody made an ask, but it wasn't powerful.
Yeah, there you go. So those are key elements to being successful at the party. So even if you're a shy filmmaker, you need a dynamite trailer that moves people emotionally. And it doesn't have to be long, but it must move people some way emotionally. Be exciting. Get them excited. If you can get them to cry, they will throw money at you. You don't even need to ask for it. That's my favorite kind of trailer. If people are pulling out their hankies and Kleenexes, they will pull out their checkbook and their credit cards. So that's really important. The second thing that's important is you must give the attendee time to participate and ask you questions. You need to find out what they're interested in. So, and that's hard for some filmmakers to learn, is they need to shut up and listen. I mean, God gave you one mouth and two ears for a reason. You should listen twice as much as you talk, and you'll be more successful. So that has to happen. And then the other thing is someone in the room who is respected by everyone else in the room, and often it's the host, but it could be anyone else in the room who's respected by everybody, needs to get up and make a very powerful and direct and passionate ask for support right away. And if you don't do all of those things, you're losing money. You're losing the opportunity for donations.
Well said. That's great. Well, another funding party I went to, this gentleman had a board made. I think he went like to FedEx, and maybe it was 4 feet long and maybe 3 or 4 feet high. And it started with executive producer 5,000. Yeah. And it had a line next to it, to put the name on.
Yeah.
And the second was associate producer 2,500, and there were 2 lines.
Yeah.
down to 1,000 and about 5 lines, and then down to 500, and that was it. He didn't go any lower. And so I had driven there without, the GPS, and it was up in the mountains. I got lost, finally got there, and I was a nervous wreck. So he said, okay, now, Ms. Dean, what I want you to do is we have to get the $5,000 donation. If we don't get that, I'm not taking any money till we. I said, wow, you're going to be that strict? He said, yes. And I said, well, and who's going to ask for that? And he said, you are.
That's great.
Oh, my God.
It put you on the spot, right?
Yes, I mean, it would have been nice that he told me ahead of time I could have practiced or something, but I did it. I talked about. I said, listen, I've worked on this film for 3.5 years, and if I get an associate producer credit, I'll be thrilled to death. I've put in countless hours, and he has too, and he's a dedicated filmmaker, and he's good. So this one-time offer, I'm only going to offer this one time. Anyone who will write a check right now for $5,000, you can have an executive producer credit.
Yeah.
And up went a hand. Some woman just said, I have to have that.
Yeah.
And that was the best moment I've had in years, Maury.
That's great. Yeah, it's wonderful when it happens. It feels great. And that's what you have to do. You have to be passionate and just ask directly.
Yeah,
don't tiptoe around it, because everybody knows why they're there that night. They know they're going to be
Yes, they are.
And that's why house parties are successful, because they are a self-correcting environment. What I mean is, if people are not going to give money and they don't want to give money, they don't come that night, because they know you're going to ask. And that's why 70 to 80% of the people who show up that night should end up giving you money if you do it right, because they know they're going to be asked. They've walked through the door and they're saying to you, give it your best shot. I know you're going to ask me for money tonight. I brought my credit card, I brought my checkbook, I got cash, and if you do it right, then I'll give you the money.
Right.
So I do want to say a couple of things about that particular ask. And one is, the amounts are really important, and they should be appropriate for the people you've invited. And that's why sometimes you have to throw more than one party, because some parties are appropriate for people who can give $5,000. Some parties are appropriate only for people who can give $500, and some parties are appropriate for people who can give $100 or less. You don't want to mix those parties and those people together, so they need to be disparate. The second thing is, I would always have an amount that's other, no matter what your low point is. So maybe $500 is the least that you want to get that they can afford, but I always say other.
Okay.
Because I'm never turning any donation down. And the other thing is, a little mechanism I like that works is to have what I call a shill in the audience. And that's someone who, before the party, has already agreed that will stand up and give you a large amount once you ask. And that really helps fuel other people giving.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's a great idea. Yes, it would fuel, because when we asked for more donations, the hands went up and the checks came out, and so it was $5,000, and they could afford it. Believe me, there were bank presidents, top directors in Hollywood. That was very easy.
Right.
But I thought it was really wonderful that the woman took the lead, and because most of the time they have to check with their husbands. But she didn't ask; she just took it.
Yeah, well, these days, everybody's got the power. So
got the power, right?
Yeah.
Now, your book also talks about a friend-raising party, and I've never heard of that. So, could you share something about that?
Yeah, I mean, what I find quite frequently is that people say they're going to throw a fundraising house party, and they end up throwing a friend-raising party by accident. And they're very similar, but they're different. In friend-raising, you're not asking people for money. That's the big difference. You're promising them that if they come to the party, they will not be asked for money. You're just going to inform them about what you're doing, and maybe ask for advice and feedback. And, fundraising often turns into fundraising. However, I've got filmmakers that come to me and say, I'm going to do a fundraising house party, and here's what I'm going to do that night. And it doesn't include asking for money. So if you are doing a fundraising house party, you must let people know they will be asked for money, and you must actually ask for money that night. You're always, whatever you're always doing fundraising. Always. Every day, every moment, every time you talk to somebody, you're doing fundraising. And you're hopefully quite frequently turning that into fundraising.
Yes. Yes, that really is the job of the filmmaker from the inception of the film, isn't it?
Yes, yes.
Well, now tell us, where can we buy the Fundraising House Party book?
Oh, well, the best place is to come to my website, which is my last name, warshawski.com, WARSHAWSKI.com, and you can buy them directly from me. And in fact, if you mention the show, drop me an email before ordering, I'll give you an additional $5 discount. So it's already discounted a little bit, but I'll throw in another minus $5. But if you just need to go any place and you can't remember how to spell my last name, it's on Amazon. I've got it available on Amazon.com, both as an ebook and as a hardcover.
Great. Well, now, could you tell us about your book, Shaking the Money Tree? It's in the 3rd edition. It's got to be good to get to a 3rd edition. That's quite an achievement.
Well, people tell me it's the Bible on the subject, so I'll accept that.
Good.
It's been around since, the first edition. You asked me when the first edition came out, and I had to go back and find out. It was 1994.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah, and then those were a different world and different times. But I tried to write a book that was both very, very practical, like the House Party book, but also inspiring and a little theoretical, because I'm actually a little more interested in that. So it's a bit about how to live a life as an independent filmmaker and the basic building blocks for being successful at that. And then it's a lot about the different avenues of fundraising and the very specific granular thing that you need to learn and do to be good at any of that. So, for instance, there is a couple of sample grants in there. There's talk about how to do a pitch, how to talk to funders, a little bit of everything. And I brought in a lot of experts from the field to give their specific about areas where they're more expert than I am. So it's got that full range of work in it, and I'm kind of well known for it, although I don't do fundraising anymore, but I just give people the book and say, in fact, that's why I wrote it to begin with, is I got tired of telling people how to do it, so I wrote a book. Unfortunately, after people read the book, they still want to talk to me. So
I'm sure they do, more than ever, yes.
Yeah.
Well, I love the platform that you teach filmmakers. You want them to find their mission as a filmmaker, their vision for themselves, and clearly define their values. So could you share a bit of that with us?
Yeah, for me, that is the bedrock of all of my work with every client, especially with independent filmmakers. So what I began to understand when I was first doing this work with filmmakers on helping them fundraise and create strategies for fundraising was I was looking at their impediments and why they weren't getting grants. So filmmakers would come to me and say, I've hit a wall, nobody's giving me money for my grant proposals, my ask isn't working, I'm stuck, what's happening here? And what I began to realize was they weren't grounded well enough in the very basic, deep areas that would not only lead them to money, but will make people want to give them money. And that first step, the first big rock, was values. Did they understand what their specific and personal core values were, because you talk to anyone who's really in fundraising, and they will tell you that what a donation is an investment in values. It's really a values exchange. So the donor is saying to you, you are amplifying values in the world that I want to increase, to see multiply and to nourish. And those are my values, and that's why I'm giving you money, essentially. If you really dig deep into that exchange of the donor giving the money to the filmmaker, and that's why trust is so huge. So how do you engender that trust? Well, the first thing is to be really clear about who you are deeply. And that's either going to attract people to you, which is good, and or detract people away from you quickly, and that's really good too, because you don't want to waste time with people who aren't in that same kind of values world with you. It's going to be an unhealthy relationship. So I have all of my clients identified their core values first, and I've rarely met a filmmaker who's done that before we work together. And that's why you noticed in the first paragraph you read about who I am, it's like the second sentence of my website, I say what my core values are. And I'm just saying to people, if these values are tasty to you or warm to you, great, maybe we can work together. If they're not, then do me a favor, don't call me. It's not going to work. Okay, so that's values. And then the second little animal that's really important in my work is your mission, your purpose. Why are you doing this work? And for the filmmaker, you must be very, very grounded in that. Often a filmmaker will say, well, here's the mission of my film. I'll say, no. Eventually we'll get to that. I want to know what your mission is first. Why are you doing this work? Why do you feel it's so important to be a documentary filmmaker? Why make documentaries as opposed to like writing a book or lecturing or just writing a check to help save whatever it is you want to do in the world? So, and that work is really very important and often deep and emotional work for the filmmaker to find the heart of what they're doing. And the reason that's important is two things. One is it's your brand. It's how you speak to the world about why you're doing the work. But more importantly it is your energy nugget. So when you get stuck and the work that's really hard, you go back to your mission and say to yourself, am I still really committed to this? Do I remember why I'm doing this? Is it still important? Because if it's not, let me find something that's important and I'll put my energy there. And it helps the filmmaker get through those tough times, and if you are an independent filmmaker, you will have tough times.
Exactly, and that gets you out of bed and moving. You made
That's
that
right.
commitment, and that's who you are. And sometimes they get into such despair that they think, did I say that? And that sort of pulls them back together.
Yeah, and that's where I'll take the filmmaker when they're having difficulty or getting depressed or get stuck. I'll say, well, let's go back and look at your mission statement. Wow. Are you still committed to that? Does it still work? And that's why filmmakers sometimes might take 6 months to a year to really articulate that mission statement well. And I like it to be really compact, maybe 25 words or less. And every word has to be important and just the right word. So that's the mission. And then the last little stepping stone in my triumvirate is something I call vision. And it has its own purpose and role to play. And vision is simply, I'll say to the filmmaker 3, 5, 10 years from now, what do you see yourself doing? What does that look like? What do you look like? How much money are you making? What kind of work are you doing? Who are you working with? Where do you live? Draw me a really vibrant picture of what that looks like in the future. And once they do that, it serves two large functions. The first is that's where energy and excitement comes from, is seeing the change you want to make and getting excited about that. And that's how you bring people along with you, how you create teams who are also excited. Because you show them that picture of what the world looks like today, but what you want it to look like tomorrow. And the difference between that two is just really, it gets people excited, or you're hoping it does. So it's like the area of excitement. But the other thing that's crucial for me and the filmmaker when we work together is it's the vision that gets you strategic. Because once you can decide what you want in the future, then you can step back and look at your current status and say, what do I need to change? Like in the next 6 months, if I want to get across the street, what do I need to learn how to do? Do I need to take a class in walking or swimming or driving? Where do I put my money, my energy to push me forward the best? So it's how you get intentful and smart about how you spend your time and energy and money, is understanding and committing to your vision. So of the three animals, once you identify your core values, they never change because you're stuck with those once you're a young adult. Your mission, you're going to have missions for yourself as a filmmaker, but also as yourself as a husband or daughter or whatever else you do in your life. You'll have those different missions. And because things change in the world, sometimes your missions will have to get adjusted. Typically, they don't change that much. But your vision, because the world keeps changing, your vision might change dramatically as you begin to move forward. So you want to keep checking back in on your vision and adjusting your strategies accordingly. So that's my little map of how I get clouds moving.
That is so powerful. I remember you saying one time that a filmmaker you had worked with years before came to you and told you that while he was going through some old papers, he found the vision that he had drawn for himself, and he was, in fact, living that vision.
Yeah, and I got so excited when I heard that because I remembered the drawing he was doing. And quite often as a vision exercise, I'll have the filmmaker make drawings. I'll have them draw a picture of the future that they want, what they're excited about, everything that's in it. Even if it's just like stick figures and, they don't need to know how to draw. And then I'll also, after that, have them draw a picture of their current state of affairs. What does that look like? What does the future look like? I mean, your current reality look like? And I remembered his drawings very vividly because they were so dramatically different. And he's a filmmaker that is knowable. I just won't mention his name. But you're right. He called me back years later and said, I found that drawing and I made that happen. And I was very excited for him. The one thing about vision is timing. And that is, I'll tell my clients, draw at least 3 years ahead. Mm-hmm. Because if you want to make a real change, I know it can happen in 3 years. Even if it's like a major change, it's going to take maybe at least 3 years.
Absolutely. Wow. Well, Claire and I, thank you so much for being with us and sharing all this information. And I'm sure that we will get a lot of emails from filmmakers thanking you for this great kindness. Yes. And your book is on Amazon, Shaking the Money Tree, 3rd edition, right?
Yeah, and it's also available on my website. And again, if anyone wants the book, write me first, and I'll give you a $5 discount on that book as well.
Oh, wonderful. Okay.
I'll even sign it.
Oh, Maury.
Unless you ask me not to,
No. I always love it when I get books signed. Okay. Well, you've done us a great service. Thank you very much, and lots of love to your daughter from both of us.
My pleasure, and you do a great service for the field as well. Thank you so much.
Okay. It was a pleasure.
Have a great evening.
Certainly. Indeed. Thank you, Maury.
Bye-bye.
Take good care. And to our listeners, I want to tell you how grateful we are for the donations you have given to support our podcast. Carol and I sincerely thank you for donating at FromTheHeartProductions.com. We urge you to send us your ideas for more shows. Who do you want to have interviewed? Topics that you would like us to cover? Just let us know. And please join us next week for the Art of Film Funding podcast. And be well, everyone. Now, in its second edition, Carol Dean's popular book, The Art of Film Funding, has 12 new chapters to cover all areas of film financing and how to avoid expensive pitfalls. Learn how to start with an idea and end with a trailer, how to make an ask for money, create your story structure and your trailer, legal advice, fair use, successful crowdfunding, how to ask for music rights, and what insurance you can't shoot without. Available on Amazon under Carol Dean and at FromTheHeartProductions.com. I want to remind our listeners that David Raiklin is a brilliant and talented award-winning musician who scores films and can compose music for a trio or for a full orchestra. David is a very good friend to the independent filmmaker and comes highly recommended by From the Heart Productions. If you need music to help tell your story, please contact him at davidraiklin.com. That's David, RAIKLEN.com. And Carol and I want to thank you for tuning in to The Art of Film Funding. Please visit our website at FromTheHeartProductions.com. You can also find us on Facebook and Twitter. Good luck with your films, everyone.
When it's PCS time, you know the drill. Pack, research the new base, get the kids in school, because family supports family. At American Public University, we support military families with flexible, affordable online education that moves with you. As a military spouse, your tuition rate is the same as your partner's, just $250 per credit hour. American Public University, education that moves with you. Learn more at apu.apus.edu/military.
It is Ryan Seacrest here. There was a recent social media trend which consisted of flying on a plane with no music, no movies, no entertainment. But a better trend would be going to ChumbaCasino.com. It's like having a mini social casino in your pocket. Chumba Casino has over 100 online casino-style games, all absolutely free. It's the most fun you can have online and on a plane. So grab your free welcome bonus now at ChumbaCasino.com. Sponsored by Chumba Casino. No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 18 plus terms and conditions apply.